Okay, so we are going to look at a couple word problems, and then we're going to look at something new. I really suggest following along rather than continuing to work on the worksheet that you have. So this type of word problem is super common. I find with students who have trouble with this unit, a lot of them it's because they can't figure out the word problems. An easy way, sort of, if you're on the test especially, and there's a problem where it's describing something like this, and you're not sure that your drawing is correct. Because the first step when it's a word problem in this unit is going to be to draw the triangle. There's always a triangle, and the step's going to be to draw the triangle. If you are drawing your triangle and you're not sure if it's right, like you're not sure that you put the sides in the right spot or whatever, ask me, and I'll if I can, if it feels like reasonable, I'll tell you, yeah, that's correct, or no, this angle should be here, or whatever. Okay, just to help you out a little bit, because I don't want that to be the downfall, is that you're not very good at reading problems. Especially if your first language is in English, this can be hard sometimes to figure out what the problem means. Like, where does this side go? Or even if your first language is English, some people it's just not a strength. So just ask me. Okay, so a 10-foot ladder leans against the side of a building with its base 4 feet from the wall. So ladders, I don't know why. We often have ladders leaning against walls in math, it seems. There's a lot of problems like this. Even as you move on through high school, even my calculus students have problems like this. So we have like the wall, right, up and down. We have the ladder leaning against it, and we have the ground. Okay, that's the triangle we're dealing with here. And yeah, you could draw a more detailed picture if you wanted, like with an actual wall and with the ladder, but you don't have to. You know it's going to be a triangle. Okay, I'm not a very good drawer, so I don't do that kind of stuff. Now, it's a 10-foot ladder. So where would the 10 feet go? Would it go on the hypotenuse? And that's, maybe it seems really obvious to everybody in the room, I don't know. But a very common accident that people do is they put 10 on the vertical. Like, they're like, oh, it's 10 feet tall, so it's going to go on the vertical. But it's the ladder. The ladder is the part that's leaning. Okay, so it's there. And the 4, it says... just put it over there in those bins. Okay, it says it's 4 feet from the wall, so where should the 4 go? On the base. Okay, so there we go. Now, here, it wants to know the angle to the nearest degree, which means a whole number. Does the ladder make with the ground? So the ladder and the ground, that's right here. So it wants to know that angle. Now here, if we label this triangle... Okay, if I label this triangle, my H, you guys already said, is the 10. What's the 4? Adjacent. So this last side here is the opposite. Now we've kind of run into a problem here, because at this point we've only been using tangent. Yeah. And we don't have the O. So Winston just said I should do c squared minus b squared, which I should. Yeah, I should do the subtraction. So we practiced Pythagorean theorem yesterday, so hopefully it's fresh. I'm looking for a side that's not the hypotenuse, so I need to subtract. So I'm using c squared minus b squared, or a squared, whatever order you want to put them in. So I'm doing 10 squared take away 4 squared, which is a squared, which if I do it, 10 squared take away 4 squared, that's 100 take away 16, so it's going to be 94 is a squared. Okay, and then I take the square root of 94. So on my calculator, I pull out my calculator and I go square root of 94 is 9.695-ish. Okay?
When I did it, I got 84.
Oh, is it 84? Yeah, 16. Sorry, I just did 6. Thank you, guys. Okay, so I do 84 instead, which makes it a different answer. It's 9.165. Now here, what I'm going to say to you guys in grade 10, in this unit and in other units, when there's mistakes, when students make mistakes but are very close to the right answer, usually it's because of rounding. So a really good habit to get into now, we're starting to get into high school math, is that you shouldn't be rounding things off until the very end. Okay? Ideally, this was a decimal that doesn't end. Okay? It's like 9.16515139. And even though that's as far as my calculator shows, it keeps going. That decimal never ends. ideally, I would keep using that whole decimal. If I have a calculator like this, that's really easy because I can kind of copy and paste it. And I can show you guys that individually if you have one of these. I'm not going to show everybody because most of you don't have them. Okay, it's really easy though. I can use that whole decimal. If you don't, if you have like a little calculator, some of them even you can still kind of copy and paste. And if you're interested in that, I can show you. But for the most part, what you need to do is you need to write down at least a few digits. Like changing this to 9.2 is rounding too much. Okay? Because we're not finished the problem. We know that this side here, the O, is 9.165. That is not the answer to this question. The answer to this question is what the angle is. So you should not be rounding at all until you are at the answer. Okay? And if you do round early, sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you get the right answer anyway and it's all perfect. Sometimes it affects your answer enough that you're a bit off. Okay? So if you're somebody who's, I know if you're happy with losing a half mark here and there, that's not a big deal. But some people really would like to have like a 90 or higher in the class or on their tests. You really need to make sure that you are not rounding until the end. Okay, so if I have that 9.165, now I have opposite and adjacent. Now I have everything I need. So I can do tan. Now, something that people do a lot is they just write, and it's a pet peeve of mine, and I'm sure some of you did it on the sheet. Don't worry too much if that's you, because we're just starting. But a lot of time what I'll get tan equals 9.165 over 4, because that's opposite over adjacent. Okay. This, I don't like this, because this isn't true. Tan is not equal to 9.165 over 4. Tan is not equal to anything. Okay. Tan is, like I said yesterday, is an operation. So tan, just imagine when you see tan, think of it as like a plus sign or a multiplication sign. It doesn't equal anything. You need to put something in that spot after tan. You can't just write tan. So if there's nothing there, like in this question, or in the questions that you were doing on the sheet where it was a question mark, you could put a question mark. You could put tan question mark if you wanted. Okay? Or another thing you can always do is you can use a theta. Okay? Remember we looked at yesterday, theta is that symbol. It's like a circle with a line through it, like that. Or if you really wanted to, you could pick a letter, like name it, call it A. Okay? We should name things, right? We do that. So put something there, please. Then it's just a matter of typing into your calculator. So I go second tan, okay, and I get 66.4. And it wants it to the nearest degree, so 66.4 is 66. Okay, now I'm just going to check here. Yeah, so if I'd rounded off, if I'd been like, instead of 9.165, if I just picked 9.2, and I thought, close enough, 9.2 is pretty close. And then I did this with 9.2 on my calculator, I get 66.5, and I would have rounded up to 67. So I would have been wrong. Okay? And I know that feels like you're not really wrong, you're just one off, but it's wrong. Okay? So please don't round until the end. That's the lesson I'm trying to get you to do. So please don't round to the very end. Grade 10s, I often find round sooner than they should. So please leave it right to, just because when you're younger you do that, and that's the norm. So it's not because of anything wrong with you in particular. Okay, so please try not to. I'll keep bugging you about it. Okay, so now we're going to get into finding sides, which is the other part of this this section here. You already found angles, right? You found angles on that worksheet. Like when you get 38 degrees or whatever at the end, that's finding an angle, which is awesome. Today, what we're going to do here before you leave is we're going to learn how to find sides, and we're going to practice it a bit. Okay, I'm going to make sure you get at least a tiny bit of practice in. So here it asks us, and it's covered a little bit, but trust me, it says determine the length of AB to the nearest tenth of a centimeter. Okay, so they want us to find AB to the nearest tenth of a centimeter. Now what I do first with these questions, this is different, by the way. It's a totally different process. Parts of it are the same, but it is different. So what I do first when I'm looking for a side is I mark the side I'm looking for with an X. Okay? Or if you really don't like X's, you can use some other number, but I like X's because I'm a math teacher. So I'm going to put x right there at AB. Okay, is that good with everybody? Okay, now what I do, just like before, is I'm going to label my triangle. So this is not changed. You're always labeling your triangle. So the angle that I'm dealing with, because like before you were just identified, it had a question mark, or it told you it was Z or whatever. The angle you're dealing with here is whichever angle has a number. So I'm dealing with angle 30. So if I'm dealing with angle 30, which side is my hypotenuse? C to A. The blank side there. Okay, A to B, what would that side be? Opposite. So the last one is adjacent, is my 10. Hey, and we're still dealing with tan all the time, so it's always going to work out that it's tan that you're using, just so you know. But here we have opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Even if I didn't know that it was going to be tan, I'm looking for x. Okay, I'm looking for x, and I have 10. So it's O and A, which is tan. Okay, tan all the time here, tan all day. So tan is going to be, and this is when things get different. Okay, because before I would write like tan theta, or tan z, or tan x. Now I have the angle. So what I'm going to write is I'm going to write tan 30. That's where the angle goes. Okay, because I know what the angle is. The angle's 30. Okay, so I'm going to write tan 30 equals, and then I do opposite over adjacent, right? So opposite over adjacent. What's my opposite? X. I don't know what it is yet. And my adjacent is 10. Okay, now, here we go. We've got an equation. This is an equation. And I want to figure out what x is. Technically, what we're going to do here is a little bit of algebra, but like easy algebra. So don't let that freak you out if you hate algebra. Algebra always just means solving for x or solving for a variable. Okay, so all we have to do here is we want to isolate x. That's always what you're trying to do. And in this situation where you have x over something like we do here, x over 10, the way to solve it, because x over 10 means x divide by 10, we want to use an inverse operation like Michaela just said. So what's the opposite, the inverse of dividing? Multiplication. So all I do is I times by 10 on both sides, because anytime you do something to one side of an equation, you have to do it to the other side too. That's a rule you learn when you first start doing algebra. What happens is that here, the times 10 and the divide by 10 cancel off. So I'm left with just x equals, and I type into my calculator, and this is where things are a little different. You don't press second tan. This is when you just press tan. So I type it in exactly how it looks. I just type in 10 times tan 30. And I just type in exactly how it looks, and I get 5.77. It says nearest tenth, so I'll write 5.8. There we go. That's it. It's pretty easy. Okay, it's a one-step kind of thing. You write the problem down, you do your multiplication on both sides, type it into your calculator. Okay, so try the other one that's up there. Okay, so the other one that's on the slide there, try it out. Okay, it's got a box around it. Mm-hmm. So you go 10 times 30, and then you press 10, and then you press enter. Okay, it's kind of backwards in the slide thing, yeah. Okay, and I'll put it up here. I just wanted everyone to be able to write it down. Okay, this is the one you're going to try right now. Okay, this picture here. So try to find x, y. So here, you're looking for x, y. So I know tan 30, I'll just write it out again here if you haven't written it down, is x over 10. So I times by 10, times by 10, and I get so do the same thing here. Okay, so set it up exactly the same way. Give it a try. Make sure your answer kind of seems reasonable. Like if you got 50 or something, that would be wrong, probably. And please write down all the steps. Okay, people like to just think, well, okay, I know what I'm going to multiply together. Don't do that. Write out the steps, because once we have more different types of problems, you're going to get very confused. I'll give you guys another minute. If you've done it, be patient for the person sitting next to you. Of whether or not you've done it correctly. So be careful with it. Now I just want to go over one more type here, because there's really only two types. When you're solving for sides, there's two situations that can arise. The one we just did, where we ended up with x over 10 or x over 5, or this situation, which is a little bit different. So here, if I'm looking at 20, and I'm trying to label my sides, now it tells me I want EF, so I'm going to put my x up there at EF. Okay, now if I'm labeling my sides OAH, H would be which side?
D to F.
D to F. O would be 3.5, and A then has to be the x. So now if I set this up, I have tan 20 equals, and I do O over A, so it's 3.5 over x. This is where I start seeing people make mistakes usually. Is because people really like it when the x is on top, so they just want to put the x on top all the time. They just switch it. Now you can't do that, unfortunately. Okay, so you have to make sure that your O is on top. So if that's the number, then the x is on the bottom. Now when x is on the bottom, you can't solve it the same way. I can't just go times 3.5 times 3.5. That won't work. Okay, that's what you do when x is on top. So when x is on the bottom, what you have to do instead, there's a trick, and I'm just going to show you the trick. If you're someone who doesn't like tricks, you want to know why, okay, talk to me privately, or like right after class or whatever. I can show you really quickly why. But there is a pretty simple trick to follow. Okay, and this is, I think, easier for most people if they just learn the trick, because the reason is quite long. What you do is you switch, not that 20, tan 20 for x. Okay? So you switch where tan 20 and x are. So instead I have x equals 3.5 over tan 20, which means 3.5 divided by tan 20. So I type into my calculator 3.5 divide by tan 20, and I do get 9.6. So my answer is 9.6. So similarly, okay, it's really similar. So it's one or the other. You either are going to have x on top and you multiply, or you have x on the bottom and you divide. It's one or the other. Winston, what's your question?
Is there ever going to be where in a situation where never mind.
Okay. So I want you guys here. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to hand out some practice. Okay, at the end of class, we started to see this, and you practiced it a couple times. So there's two different situations that can happen. Okay, so if this is our right angle triangle here, if we are given an angle here and told that, let's say we're told that is 58, okay, and then we're told that this side here is 9, and we want this side. Okay, that's one situation that we could have. So in this situation, we have the angle. You're always given the angle. If you're looking for in trig in general, you always are given two things. Okay, you're given two things. So you're either given two sides, or you're given one angle and one side. It's one or the other. Okay, so here we're given one angle and one side. Then you just identify what sides you're dealing with here. So decide 9 there, is that OA or H?
9 is
A, that's right. That's the adjacent. And X, is that O or H? O. So we have O and A, opposite and adjacent, which is why we're using tan. Because even though we've only been using tan up to now, try not to get too attached to tan, because it's just one of the 3 and they're all equally good. But we've only been using tan. But the reason we use tan in this case is because we have O and A, and that's TOA. Remember, it's so, ka, TOA. We'll see that at the end of class today about dealing with other ones. Okay, so here we have tan, and the way we set it up, we saw it just yesterday towards the end of class, is you write tan. What would I put next to tan? 58. And it is kind of tempting sometimes to put X there, like if you're not thinking about it, right? If you're just like going on autopilot, it's really tempting to put the X there. So try not to. Remember that what goes with tan is always the angle. So if there's an angle there, if you know the angle, you're going to put the number. If you didn't know the angle, if it was like a theta or if it was just a letter like A or something, you'd put that letter. Okay, and then it's opposite over adjacent. So what goes on top? X, and 9 goes on the bottom. So we multiply by 9 on both sides, just like Winston's saying. So I go times 9 times 9. And then it's just typing this into a calculator. So if you have a calculator, you just type that in. Just double check. Ooh, oops. 9. Ooh.
14.4.
My batteries are really low. Okay. I'm going to have to. I believe you, but I just want to have a calculator for the rest of my class time anyway. I'll put some new batteries in there. Okay. 9 times 10, 58. It's 14.4, just like Winston said. So we have 14.4. And it's just a matter of typing it in. So it's a really short, quick process. Like, this isn't something that I expect you to be sitting on, staring at for a long time, right? It's just you set it up, you do it. Okay? Now, there's 2 situations, like I said. So that's one of the 2 situations. The other situation that you will run into is where you're given an angle. So let's say we're given this one and we're told it's 32. And you're given the side down here. Let's say it's 5, and you want this side. Okay, so in this situation, the difference is if I label my sides, okay, I'm like 5 there, is that OA or H? It's O, and X is A. Messy. Okay, so X is A. So it's different because in the last situation, O was A, and now X is A. So when I set it up the same way. You know, I'm like, okay, it's tan 32 equals, and it's O over A, so it's 5 over X. So these are 2 situations, and you need to treat them differently. You can't treat them exactly the same way, which is what people like to do sometimes. So you can't do the exact same thing. What I tend to see happen is students who have a little bit of trouble will multiply by 5. You can't do that. What you have to remember is that when X is on the bottom, you switch them. Okay? It's just a little rule you just got to remember. So you just write it out. Instead of tan 32 equals 5 over X, you write X equals 5 over tan 32. Okay, and yeah, don't just write 32. Sometimes people do that accidentally. That's not very often, but sometimes. And then you just type it in. 5 divided by tan 32, you get 8. Pretty much exactly 8. Pretty close anyway. It's 8.00. Okay, so let's say 8.0 here. It's lagging a little bit. So that is how you do this. Okay, you just figure out which side's O, which side's A. Then you follow the process depending which version it is. So either multiply or divide, depending on which type of question it is. So maybe what we're going to do right now is we'll just start working on that worksheet, because I don't want to, there's some word problems I want to go over today for sure, but there's none on that worksheet. So okay, we can work on the worksheet.